Hello, I'm Pamela, a 30-year-old. I've been married to Patrick for 3 years now. We don't have children yet. Our lives took a significant turn following the unexpected death of Patrick's father, Jesse. At the time, we were residing in a different state, and the news of Jesse's sudden heart attack came as a complete shock. During the funeral, Patrick's uncle subtly hinted that Patrick, being the youngest and only son, was expected to return home to be closer to family and help his mother cope. A few months later, Patrick revealed that he had secured a transfer to an office closer to his family home. He made this decision on his own and informed me afterward, which upset me because such a major decision should have involved both of us. When I expressed my frustration, Patrick apologized and explained that he anticipated my objections. He admitted knowing that I have a strained relationship with his mother, Mary, which is mutual. When we lived farther away, our visits to his parents were limited to extended holidays, mostly due to our work commitments. Mary often complained about our infrequency, comparing us to Amanda and Diane, Patrick's sisters who lived nearby and visited often. Despite the distances and costs involved, Patrick always defended our situation. Our relationship with Mary had always been a bit tense but manageable. However, Mary's main grievance with me centered around us not having children yet. She had once bluntly questioned this during a summer visit, embarrassingly focusing on my ability to bear children, even comparing me. I decided to join Patrick, reasoning that we wouldn't be living together continuously anyway. To my surprise, Mary seemed genuinely pleased with my decision. 3 weeks later, she invited me over for tea, marking the first time I accepted such an invitation from her, albeit reluctantly. When I arrived at my in-laws' house, Mary and Amanda were there to greet me. "Pamela, it's been so long. Why haven't you visited since moving here?" Amanda asked, her tone laced with sarcasm. Inside, I was already regretting my decision to come. Mary chimed in, almost cheerfully, "I was so happy when you decided to move closer, but it seems I was mistaken. You don't like me, do you?" I wanted to affirm her suspicion just to see her reaction, but of course I held back. "I don't dislike you. It's just that I've been feeling unwell due to adjusting to the new environment," I explained, which was partly true. I had been resting at home due to fatigue, and Patrick hadn't mentioned this visit to me. Why was I here today just to endure their harsh words? Mary quickly accused me of disliking her, but wasn't it the other way around? How were we supposed to get along under these conditions? Amanda sharply interjected, "How can you speak to your mother-in-law like that? Apologize to her. Say you're sorry." I expected Mary to respond with anger, but her reply caught me off guard. "You're right. I have been mean. I'm sorry, Pamela. I'm also sorry about the comments regarding children. I was being nosy." I braced myself for a lecture, anticipating some hidden snark, but there was none. Even Amanda looked surprised. "All I wanted was to hold a grandchild," Mary confessed. She explained that Amanda's husband was infertile and Diane seemed to have fertility issues, so she had pinned her hopes on Patrick and me, despite knowing about Amanda and Diane's struggles. Patrick and I had discussed having children and were considering it, so I asked for some patience. "Please, just give us some time," I said, bowing my head slightly. Despite everything, I couldn't shake off my sense of duty. "I'm sorry," I added, "but do visit us sometimes." After that, Mary and Amanda resumed watching TV and sipping their tea as if the earlier tension had never happened. "I like this announcer," Mary remarked about her favorite local TV personality. "She's so energetic and bright." Watching them and the TV, I felt a pang of regret. Maybe if I had been more outgoing, things could have been different with Mary and her family. It was a fleeting, somewhat naive thought. I was relieved to have shared my feelings earlier that day, hoping it might lead to better relations. Yet, my optimism was short-lived. That evening, Patrick stormed in, visibly upset. "I heard from Mom that you said you have no intention of getting along. She was crying, Pamela. What did you say to her?" I was stunned by his reaction. Just earlier he had left with a smile, and now he seemed to be accusing me of something entirely different. "Patrick, there's been a misunderstanding. I tried to clarify. I told her it's difficult for me to be friends given our current relationship. How does that translate to me not wanting to get along? I was scared now. Patrick seemed to fully believe Mary's twisted version of the story. His earlier smile now appeared deceptive, and I didn't know how to navigate this. I tried to explain further, but he wasn't convinced. Then, my phone buzzed with a message from Amanda. After all the effort of moving here, weren't you prepared to make it work? If you're here with us, you need to be a bit more patient. Patrick glanced at me as if echoing Amanda's words. I moved here because I cared about being with him, not just to appease Mary and Amanda. Facing Patrick, I held his gaze and said, "It's clear that Mary and the others might never approve of me. Maybe you should consider someone she likes more." The word divorce slipped out before I could catch it, and for the first time, Patrick looked genuinely alarmed. "Wait, hold on. How did we jump to divorce? I just want you to get along better with my family," he said, bewildered by the turn of the conversation. He couldn't grasp that his family might never accept me, which left me equally baffled. However, Patrick seemed determined to resolve the misunderstanding. The next day, he returned late from work and relayed his conversation with his mother. She admitted there was a misunderstanding and apologized. "What a fuss," he said. He also mentioned that Mary's birthday was approaching and suggested, "How about we celebrate her birthday at a fancy restaurant?" The sudden shift from turmoil to talks of celebration left me perplexed, but it was clear Patrick was making an effort to mend fences, even if the path seemed incredibly rocky. Patrick suggested that if we presented the birthday dinner as my idea, perhaps it could positively shift his mother's perception of me. Though I was skeptical of Mary's ability to appreciate such gestures sincerely, given her complex personality, I agreed to make the restaurant reservation. I invited Amanda and the others, specifying a table for 8. Patrick consented, but as the date drew nearer, a sense of unease grew within me. Patrick had been distant lately, giving only curt, indifferent responses to my attempts at conversation, which made me feel increasingly isolated. On the day of the dinner, we arrived at the restaurant to find Mary, Amanda, and their spouses already gathered. The host showed Patrick and me to our table, casting a questioning glance that only added to my discomfort. "Happy birthday, Mary," I greeted her cheerfully, trying to bridge the gap. However, Mary didn't even acknowledge me. Instead, she turned to the others, thanking them for joining her celebration. It felt like a deliberate snub. Amanda seemed confused. "I thought today was a family gathering," she remarked, looking at me with a brief, puzzled expression. Diane, noticing the tension, looked over with concern. At that moment, I realized I was being deliberately excluded. Resolved to not let it ruin my evening, I decided to keep to myself and leave early. Just as I was settling into this plan, a staff member approached our table with an awkward demeanor. "I'm sorry, but the reservation was actually made for 7 people today," he informed us. Confused, I responded, "I distinctly reserved for 8. Could there be a mistake?" "No, it should definitely be for 8, I pressed, recounting my conversation over the phone. "Oh yes, but about a week ago we received a call from a gentleman asking to change the number to 7, the worker explained. Stunned, I turned to Patrick, looking for an explanation. His response floored me. "Yes, please, service for 7. Everyone's here now," he stated plainly, confirming the change himself. At that moment, I felt a mix of betrayal and disbelief. Patrick's actions made it clear that despite his words, his commitments to smoothing family tensions were superficial at best. The realization that he had manipulated the situation without my knowledge was deeply unsettling, casting a shadow over what was supposed to be a festive family gathering. I stood there, stunned, as Patrick turned to me with an accusatory glare. "I heard from Mom that you've been undermining our family, saying I don't earn enough and that I'm insensitive. You had a lot to say, huh?" It turned out that a week ago, when Patrick contacted Mary about the dinner reservation, she had filled his ears with all sorts of falsehoods. Blinded by anger and believing her, he He had called the restaurant, pretending to be me, and reduced the reservation from 8 to 7. The staff, recognizing the family surname, didn't question the change. I couldn't fathom how Patrick could be so easily misled in such a brief span. With this realization, I questioned my presence there. When I confronted Patrick, demanding he apologize to everyone present and reflect on his actions, he did something unexpected. He insisted that I should apologize to my in-laws and then go home alone to think things over. Naturally, I refused. I couldn't admit to things I hadn't said, nor did I need a husband who took his mother's word over his wife's. Tears of frustration welled up in my eyes. Why had I even followed him here? Seeing my distress, Patrick began to panic, but it was too late. Mary watched the unfolding scene with a smug smile, clearly pleased that her scheme was working. I spoke coldly to Patrick. "Next time, marry a younger, more docile daughter-in-law. Maybe then you'll have children and be happier." Mary's response was sharp and cutting. "Pamela, why don't you go back to your parents' house? A daughter-in-law is ultimately an outsider. I can't see you as a family. You're not charming at all, so please leave quickly." Her words stung, but they also cemented my resolve. "I'd leave even without you telling me. I'd like to see someone who can actually get along with someone as twisted as you," I retorted and turned to walk out of the restaurant. Patrick remained silent, his head buried in his hands. Just as I reached the exit, I heard someone calling my name. It was Diane and her husband. "Pamela, wait!" Diane said, clearly distressed. "I can't stand it anymore. Mom and Amanda haven't changed at all. I knew the gossip about you was false." Diane's acknowledgement of the truth amidst the chaos brought me a small sense of solace as she continued, indicating she was ready to cut ties with the toxicity. This moment of solidarity, though small and coming during a time of overwhelming emotion, hinted at some support within the family, something I desperately needed right then. As I stood there digesting Diane's words, my phone rang, flashing Mary's name. I sighed. What now? But before I could answer, Patrick's name replaced hers on the display. Muttering under my breath, I watched Diane and her husband exchange knowing looks. "Pamela, you might want to go back to the restaurant. You might see something interesting," Diane suggested, her eyes hinting at a twist I hadn't anticipated. They left, looking oddly pleased with themselves. I hesitated, but curiosity won over my desire to distance myself from the drama. When I finally answered Patrick's call, his voice was frantic, tinged with panic. "Pamela, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was all a lie. I'll send the divorce papers later," he blurted out, but then quickly pleaded, "Wait, can't you come back? Please, it's a lifetime request." His almost childish plea almost made me laugh, but remembering Diane's cryptic hint, I decided to return to the restaurant. Upon arriving, I was met by an unexpected scene. A crowd was gathered around Patrick's table where a local TV announcer, Mary's favorite, was speaking into a microphone. The atmosphere was electric with tension. Mary was stumbling over her words, clearly struggling to explain herself. "No, that's not it. It's a misunderstanding," she stammered. Patrick and Amanda looked both awkward and uneasy, clearly not prepared for this turn of events. The announcer, microphone in hand, pressed Mary further. "You loudly declared in the restaurant that Pamela is an outsider and should leave. What did you mean by that? Please explain in detail." Meanwhile, Diane's husband, along with others who had been offended by the earlier events, had quietly left the scene. It all seemed surreal. As I stood there, somewhat dumbfounded, I pieced together that this had turned into a public spectacle, possibly being broadcasted. I realized then that I had forgotten to confirm the reservation details amidst the initial chaos. As I tried to make sense of the situation, a staff member approached, noting my confusion. "It's been quite a day, hasn't it?" they remarked, explaining that a TV recording had been scheduled at the restaurant that very day, which explained the unexpected media presence. The entire ordeal had unexpectedly played out on live television, casting the family drama in a stark, unfiltered light for all to see. As I processed the unfolding events, I couldn't help but feel a mix of vindication and disbelief at the bizarre turn my evening had taken. Although the dining area offered some privacy, conversations could still be easily overheard. Just after I stepped out, a famous TV announcer approached Mary with a beaming smile, ready to conduct an interview. Mary, an avid fan, was visibly excited. "An interview? Absolutely!" she exclaimed enthusiastically. The topic was daughter-in-law and mother-in-law relationships. "We heard there was a heated argument earlier, and the daughter-in-law left in tears. Can you tell us what happened?" the announcer asked, putting Mary on the spot. Caught off guard by this direct question, Mary and Amanda's complexions paled, clearly at a loss to openly discuss the embarrassing truth about how they had manipulated the situation to alienate their son's wife. Patrick, spotting me from a distance, made a desperate plea. "Pamela, please, I can't let this shame be known. It was all a misunderstanding," he implored, looking utterly defeated. By then, my feelings for him had evaporated. Mary tried to smooth things over with a strained smile. "Oh, we usually call each other Pamela. Pamela, come over here," she beckoned. As I approached, the microphone was directed at me. "You say you call each other Pamela, but how does the daughter-in-law view her mother-in-law?" the announcer asked. "I've never been called that," I replied calmly. "I've been called unpatriotic several times for not having children, though that's due to Patrick and I not feeling ready or confident enough to start a family. We haven't even tried for over 2 years. That's what I was always told was grounds for divorce," I recounted. I continued, sharing how Patrick had initially supported me when I first fell ill and had to take a leave from work. I appreciated his kindness and followed him here, hoping a change of environment might help, but this is the result. By then, I was out of tears and detachment had taken their place. Seeing Mary and Amanda looking embarrassed and pitiful brought a small measure of satisfaction. As I stood there, prepared for the possibility of this being broadcast nationwide, I couldn't help but reflect on the surreal day. Watching Mary's distressed expression as I mentioned the broadcast, I couldn't help but smile. "Well, since the daughter-in-law is considered an outsider, I guess I should leave. Goodbye," I said, savoring the moment as I exited the restaurant, ignoring the shouts and commotion that followed me out. The day had been long and fraught, but in that final moment, I felt a profound release. Walking away from that chaotic scene, I felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. Although Mary and her family managed to prevent the broadcast of the footage, the incident had already caused quite a stir locally, becoming a hot topic among our relatives and acquaintances. The story of what had transpired spread quickly, fueling gossip and speculation. In the aftermath, I returned to my room, packed my belongings, and moved back to my parents' house. I sent the divorce papers to Patrick, but his response was delayed, prompting me to consider involving a lawyer. To my surprise, Patrick soon appeared at my parents' doorstep. My father, Peter, who is typically a composed individual, took charge of the situation with a firm hand. Patrick offered a heartfelt apology. He expressed his intention to sever ties with his own family and promised to trust only in me going forward. However, his promises now seemed hollow. Too little, too late. Peter, visibly upset by the years of distress Patrick had caused me, didn't mince words. "Why didn't you realize this sooner? What have you done to Pamela all these years? Just sign the divorce papers and leave," he instructed sternly. With regret etched across his face, Patrick handed over the divorce papers, his handwriting shaky and difficult to read. Despite the initial difficulty, the papers were processed successfully. It later emerged that Amanda had been the real cause of her infertility, a fact she had wrongly attributed to her husband. Now, on the brink of her divorce, she no longer visited her in-laws. Patrick went back to live with his mother Mary in their small hometown. They likely faced lingering uncomfortable rumors, but that chapter of my life was closed. In the time that followed, life took a more positive turn for me. I reconnected with a classmate from my hometown, and we married. Our relationship was filled with joy, and we soon welcomed a child. We now have a 2-year-old daughter. and I am expecting our second child. My new mother-in-law is truly angelic, supportive and kind, everything Mary was not. Life is unpredictable, but at this moment, I am living a fulfilling and happy life, surrounded by love and support that I once thought was beyond my reach.